Good afternoon. Welcome to this next Lead Forensics webinar. I'm here joined by Phil from the Hub Agency, and today we're going to be talking about beyond clicks, how data-driven insights drives better leads and B2B results. So I've practiced that a couple of times. It was a little bit of a tongue tie for me, but I think I managed to make it. So welcome, Phil. I'll let you introduce yourself to everybody, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Basically, Hub Agency is a niche consultancy agency. We work predominantly with technology companies, and we've been doing that for 16 years. So I used to work on the vendor side as a marketing and creative services professional, and used to head up the global operations for that. So I set up the consultancy with a view to helping other technology vendors that are out there, particularly in startup mode, that need help with outsourced services, everything marketing, data, and guidance really on how they can best approach the market.
Okay, brilliant.
And yeah, 16 years.
Well, I mean that's a pretty long time in terms of, like you say, experience. And so I think also working agency, I'm going to say agency side. I originally was from agency side, so I kind of, it's my terminology. You get that breadth of visibility from across a number of different businesses, and so in those 16 years it's probably akin to 40 years if you were working for one company, because of that visibility. So I know we're going to dive into some specifics in a minute, but I'm really excited to kind of understand your perspective, which obviously is, you mentioned this a second ago, but data insights. We've got lots to talk about, kind of how data is actually the fundamental to a B2B marketing strategy. So before we do that, just a bit of housekeeping for everybody. So any questions, pop them into the comments, and we'll see if we can get them answered by Phil. I'm also going to pop up a poll quickly, and just whilst I'm talking, that poll is basically to see if anybody on the webinar wants to take a look at Lead Forensics. So we're going to be talking a little bit around website visitor identification and how that can fuel your kind of B2B marketing strategies. And if you wanted to take a look at your website visitors, we do have an offer running whereby if you take a demonstration and a trial, we'll send you a copy of our book, which is available on Amazon for, I think it's $79. So 101 ways to drive revenue from your B2B website. So jam-packed of tips and insights that actually we've gleaned from people like Phil, experts in the sector, on their experience. So you might well be doing 50 of these, but there's then 51 for you to be able to benefit from. So if you want to take a trial of Lead Forensics, want to have a look at your website visitors, want a copy of this book, the poll's on the screen now. So just let us know, and then we'll get in touch to get you sorted at a time that works. So I will just take that down now. So Phil, in your experience, what are some of the common data blind spots that companies face, particularly around lead generation?
It's an interesting way to start. I think
quite a big question too.
It is. And to be honest, I promise I'm not avoiding the question, but my response is a little different. I would suggest that what we see as a consultancy is more of a data blindness than data blind spots.
Interesting.
And to explain, I think organizations are bloated with tools and services that offer them data insights. So you imagine you sign up to all these different tools for, web prospecting campaigns, customer engagement, and so on. And the common issue that we see is that there's a glut of visible data. So you get all of that insight into the things that are known by the tools that you're using. But you get a very little meaningful data about the customers and the prospects that don't engage with you via forms and so on. So importantly, the lack of visible data leads to poor marketing decisions. And we commonly see organizations that are turning off one strategy to try another, and they get more and more frustrated with the partial picture that they're seeing, and the tools that they're using to deliver that activity. So really, from our perspective, the key to actionable strategy is looking at the whole picture. So who's visiting and engaging and why, and who isn't engaging and why, but still visiting your website and so on. And only by having both of those things can you make informed decisions, which is, what we all want to do for more leads, etc.
That's a really interesting perspective, because like you say, everybody looks at the metrics of what they do see, but actually to get the metrics on what you don't see too can be just as powerful, right? So it's almost like that holistic, it's a holistic blindness. Is that what you're saying?
It is. It's almost particularly at the one of the things that we very commonly see is that people are asked to create, dashboard views or consolidate all of that data, all of that noise into a view that the C-level people will be able to digest and make decisions on how, that key important thing, how much marketing budget they will give you. And I think one of the problems is that with so much data and so much crossing over and converging of those data sources from different places in the marketing mix, it's very hard for marketers to cut through all of that and build that view without being able to answer the question that inevitably will come from the C-level, which will be, why is this not more successful? Who is engaging with us, but are we reaching the right audience? Are they coming to visit us but not form filling? Why is that? What should we do about it? And you can have every data source in the world from all these different tools, but if you don't have that insight, then you have no idea where to adjust your campaign activity to make sure that you are starting to get those people to convert.
Interesting. So it's not a case of just looking at what you can see. It's a case of, like you say, if people aren't converting, well, why not? And start to look at that hidden side of things that, like you say, isn't surfaced particularly readily in a lot of tech. And so how do, because I just know people be going, yeah, that's great, but how do I see what I can't see? So how do you get that insight, and then how do you use that to benefit your strategy?
I think I promise I'm not deliberately plugging lead forensics, but it's that kind of insight. So the ability to use a tool like lead forensics, it is where it really comes to life, that kind of product in that area, because you get that unseen data and you have the ability to measure performance, but it also makes you super efficient on the lead quality side. I think the big issue is that sales and marketing have always had what I would call a dynamic relationship.
Very diplomatic way of putting
it. Yeah. And it's mainly impacted by the number and the quality of leads that marketing is passing to the sales organization. But behavior data is really key in determining genuine interest in your product or service. And I think being able to check things like company size, industry, and all those important things that you've defined as part of your marketing strategy, if you have insight of those things and yet those people aren't converting, then you can adjust and be agile about your messaging and your approach, and really make sure that not only are you then able to try and get those people to convert, but importantly, from this point of view of a salesperson, they're sat there waiting for you to give them a hot lead, right? And if you do that and you say, here's a lead that I've got for you, but it's the wrong sector and the wrong company size for the product that you're selling and the deal size that you're going after, then obviously they're not going to thank you for that because you're going to be wasting their time chasing a lead that's not appropriate. So
Yeah.
I think it's twofold. There's two parts to it. One is being able to adjust your marketing activity with a tool like lead forensics so that you can go after those people that aren't engaging. And the second part is making sure you sense check the ones that are engaging to make sure they're the right kind of company, the right kind of size, the right kind of industry sector, so that the salespeople just go, "This is a fantastic lead. It's like it's designed for the approach that we want to take, and it's more efficient, save time, saves money."
Yeah, I think, and it's like painting a picture, isn't it? Because all leads aren't made equal. We kind of know that, and there has been some marketers in the past that class a lead as anyone who's downloaded a piece of content or whatever, and we know that that's not actually leads all of the
No,
time.
it's not.
But we can also help to better equip sales teams by giving them a picture, exactly as you're saying, like what is the background of that lead in terms of their business, but also what have they been looking at? What are they interested in? Did they spend a lot of time looking at, I don't know, product A or product B? And did they come from social media or did they come from somewhere else? What's the picture? And the better picture we can paint, the better we're giving their sales team opportunity to actually make that meaningful for the business. Is that what you're saying?
It is. I think it always used to be the case that people would think that they have built the right messages to the right audience in the right sector through the right channels.
Yeah.
And then the lead would come through and they would do a quick sense check of a company that they recognize. But of course, there are so many organizations out there now that people have no clue. They've never heard of.
Yeah.
They don't know where they're located, how many staff they have, and so on. So how do you find that out unless you give them a gargantuan form that nobody wants to fill in and explain all of this stuff? You want the forms to be as short form as possible.
Yeah.
You want it to be as easy for the prospect as possible to reach out to you. Therefore, you need to bridge that gap. And I think anything that you can do to help the sales organization as a marketer is not only better for internal relations, but it's better for the company, because it's we're all about buying tools these days to create optimal performance, to reduce process bloat and all of that kind of stuff. It's the kind of thing that we as a company are here to market. That's what we do. But I think people sort of find they have a bit of a disconnect between the tools that they're buying to do all these things and the processes that they are looking to in their own marketing efforts and sales efforts, going out to the market. Anything that these tools can do to reduce the unknown, and to give both the marketers and salespeople more insight is a good thing and should be focused on.
And I think that's a great tip there in terms of that journey, because like you say, you want to get more information, but you don't want to be asking your prospect and your lead to, like you say, fill out this massive form to give you that information. So it's like, get the opportunity, enrich later, not necessarily later, like 3 days later, but enrich afterwards. So from the using the tools that you've got available to you in terms of appending that business information. Is that right?
It is, and I think in the past it was always the case that so when I was on the vendor side, I used to work for one of the first proper CRM companies many years ago, and one of the issues, and has always been thus, is that the sales teams would be focused on getting leads and engagements into the CRM system, and then there was always a disconnect between the information that was in the system and enhancing that data, creating a record of the customer, the prospect or the customer, and filling out the detail, the missing component parts. What is really amazing about the new tools and tools like lead forensics that are available now is that you can actually pass most of that information into a CRM, for example, through integration immediately. So you're not relying on the salesperson to or to not, as was often the case, fill out all of that detail so that when other people look at the customer record, they can see that information. They can understand more about who they are, what size they are, whether they're the right fit. Should we be looking to upsell, cross-sell, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is that you get the prospect to have a simple journey, but then use the intelligence from the tech to enhance that record when it's in there, as it goes into the CRM, like you say, instantaneously, so that when it's picked up the other side, it's fully enriched. Like you say, that's an efficiency play, because like you say, sales teams used to spend a lot of time looking at background information and stuff, so it makes perfect sense. I know that you've obviously you work a lot in the B2B space and in the tech space, and I know that you have helped one of your tech vendors to achieve, I think it was 300% growth in a year. Is that right?
It is.
That's a lot. How?
It is.
Can you tell us?
And to be honest, a lot of the time when we are working, particularly with the kind of clients that we work with, again, I promise I'm not blowing our trumpet or anything, but we tend to be involved with organizations where that is possible. Now, I would argue that you could achieve that kind of growth with most organizations, but importantly, we mainly work with startup technology businesses or companies that are still in rapid growth mode. So this means there's an opportunity to build out a more complete marketing platform, a platform for success, if you like. And of course, data underpins how we measure that success, but it all starts with analyzing the product, the problems that it solves, who's likely to want to buy it, all the usual things. And once we've spent time to understand all of that, then we need to also plan for how we're going to measure the success of what we're going to deliver. And in this particular case, a lot of rebuilding was involved. So new messaging, new content, complete overhaul of the website, communications channels, and so on. But this kind of growth is rarely achieved via doing one or two things, as I'm sure everyone will appreciate, because 300% is a big number. But a key component of success, and success with any other client that we have where we have achieved lower success levels, but still, good percentages, is consistency. Okay. So by that, I mean consistency of message, branded comms, graphics, and so on. But it's also about consistency of the activity. So sticking to the plan and making sure that we had, in this instance, visibility of the unseen data, as we've already been talking about. And importantly, the types of organizations that we were looking to reach, having visibility of that and remaining agile. It sounds odd to align consistency and agility in the same thing. But by that, I mean, the ability to adjust your consistent approach in terms of, the message, the kinds of events that you're going to, and so on. That is what really achieves the success. So by remaining agile and looking at the companies that we were engaging with, it meant we were able to attend more profitable events, targeted different sectors that were bubbling up through the unseen data. And we were able to ultimately build a more efficient and more targeted pipeline for the sales team, which is what we were already talking about as well. And it's a combination of all of those things that led to that big number. So
wow. And I think, there's a great thing with working with, like you say, sort of startup scale ups, is that you can mold everything from scratch, but like where you've had to redo, the website and the whole infrastructure, it's quite a big undertaking. But like you say, if you can get it
Yes.
right to start off, a lot of the time with a startup, they're good at what they do, right? They're good at the tech, but they just stick a website up and hope for the best. And so sometimes just unpicking that a little bit can, like you say, be that catalyst to move forward. And I do think that sometimes that is in certain sectors that's underestimated as to how important that can be, to actually sometimes just go, do you know what, it was good for us to start with,
Yeah.
but we need to redo things.
Yeah.
That can be painful.
I think if I may, I just think particularly in technology and technology marketing, they are much more aware of the importance of messaging and being agile to the marketplace. And therefore, we regularly get asked to do this kind of belt and braces approach to changing or shifting the marketing from one place to another, even when they're already established. And I do find that, is very much the case with tech. But I think other industries and other companies can learn a lot from that, because they shouldn't feel wedded to a particular approach and particular strategy, particularly if they're not finding that it's working for them.
Yeah, exactly that. And again, it's having that openness to be agile, isn't it? There, but also there's a message there in terms of that consistency piece that you mentioned, because you want to pivot when according to the results that you see. But if you are just fundamentally going over here and then over here and then over here and over, like, you're not giving things a chance to work, and also creating a load of, it's kind of like keep that drumbeat and change little bits, almost like with an aim to improve step by step. Would that be correct?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as I think I've already said, we see very, very commonly that people start and stop activity. And the reason for that is because they're nervous about their budget, and they're worried that they're not seeing the number of leads that they were perhaps expecting, perhaps that the algorithm within the tool that they're using for paid search or social was suggesting they would get. But of course, stopping that, starting something else is probably the worst thing they can do, because they will just be in the same position in a few weeks, a few months time, without the insight layer there for them to be able to understand why it's not working.
Yeah, and I think lead generation or demand generation, however you want to coin it, is often seen as that kind of linear process, and that's people start and stop tactics all the time. But there are lots of different layers to it. So how have you used data to help to kind of enable you to give that confidence that actually it isn't just a linear approach, it is a layer? You got to kind of like have a bit of confidence to not press stop on things. How are you using that data to support your clients, sorry, on that?
Yeah, I think again, as I was talking about, the way that we use in particular something like lead forensics is that it gives us the insight into the don'ts, the ones that aren't form filling, the ones that are engaging on the website. And what's really critical is that it's, as I mentioned, it's not about just the ones that aren't filling forms. It's the ones that are the right fit for the organization and the marketing strategy that we have put in place and spent time and effort and money and resource to do. It's about seeing a company and saying, actually, this person hasn't, or this organization hasn't filled out a form, but they have visited several pages on the website. They've engaged with various different pieces of content that we offer without form filling, for example. They've been back, 5 times. So to every intent and purpose, they are a good quality prospect, but for whatever reason, they have decided not to fill out the form. And I think the insight and the data comes to life when you can see that interaction, you can see that genuine interest, but they haven't taken that final step to reach out to you. So you then have to build strategy around how do you then approach that organization? How do you unlock the conversation that would have started if they'd have filled the form? And of course, there's a number of ways that you can do that. But yeah, it's important to have that visibility, to at least understand that what you're doing is working. It's just they haven't decided to take that final step.
Yeah. And then it's a case of figuring out, how do you get them to take that final step? Would that be correct?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, the worst thing in the world that you could possibly do is just email them and say, "Hey, I see you've been on our website several times. How about a demo?" That's everybody. The main reason that people aren't engaging and putting in email addresses and things like that is because they don't want the hard sell. They don't want to be sold to as such. They would want to reach out when they're ready. So there's all kinds of other ways that you can approach this. LinkedIn, for example, being a perfect example of that. Trying to connect with people, outreach into community groups, and making sure that you're beginning to engage with them by following their organization and so on and so on. It's the softly approach rather than the sledgehammer for a nut kind of approach.
That's interesting that, like you say, you're using that data to really then sort of look at, or the hidden data, the ordinarily hidden data, to then sort of look at it and go, okay, how are we going to influence you? We're not just going to send you an email. We're not just going to, shoot you a call or whatever. We're going to work on a multi-channel approach to try and engage you better so that then you come back to us. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's interesting because obviously, having been doing this for quite a while, I've seen the ebb and flow of should we gate our content or not? That was one of the classic questions that always came up in a big web project, for example. And I think there's a lot to be said for making things as accessible as possible to entice and engage with the audience. Obviously, the fear is it's all unseen, right? So that's why tools like this have become so important, is because you want to give people access to the information that will help them along the journey to engage with you, where they ultimately say, actually, this is really good. I want a demo. In our case, that's predominantly the end point before sales engagement. And customers and prospects are much more savvy these days. They get that, they understand. So I'm sure that many people that are watching this will understand that they're seeing a lot of Gmail addresses and things like that. And salespeople will be saying to them, exclude Gmail from the list of approved leads, for example. But the problem is people build their own accounts now just for form filling so that they don't get sold to via email. And, so people are intelligent. They work a way around the system. So we have to respect that, though. We can't just go into the data, this unseen data that we've managed to get hold of, and sort of look at that and say, okay, well, I found you out. I know where the company is. I know pretty much who it is that's looking at it based on job, function and things like that. So I'm just going to directly contact them. You absolutely don't do that. So from experience, I think we should respect that the customer is more savvy. They don't want to be hard sold to in the vast majority of cases. And we should be understanding will probably want more information. They probably want to learn more before getting to the point where they're ready to engage with you. So find a way of engaging, via softer channels like social media, LinkedIn, and so on. That's definitely the way it works best for us.
And do you find that so obviously we talked a little bit about like the sort of follow-on tactics. How do you apply any kind of logic in terms of like the trying to think about the most effective and efficient follow-on kind of tactics from a digital perspective, because obviously with a scale-up business, budget constraints can be there, and especially if you're not driving result then and there, it can be really difficult to make that investment. So how do you go about determining the most effective but also efficient ways to engage with those audiences without it being a case of direct interaction?
Yeah. So I think well, it's sort of starting at the front of that, which is the budget part.
Yes.
I mean, tech companies are no different. I mean, of course, we like to think they all have massive budgets, but particularly in startup mode, you're dealing with a smaller budget than would be ideal. So I think so when clients have a limited budget, then the temptation is always to invest in campaign activity. So you basically get your pot of money and you go, right, I'm going to spend it on this, and this. You have a list of things that you expect to work. And that could be paid search, social events, or any combination of the usual mix. And in essence, this is where the stop doing that, try this mentality creeps in, because you have that finite budget and you're basically saying, right, I'm going to go and spend a bit over here. Oh, that's not quite working the way I expected it to. Therefore, we're going to pull back and we're going to try some of this. And my advice always would be to take time to think how you will measure your chosen activity spend, how you'll measure engagement, both visible and invisible, because only then by measuring the invisible will you truly see the impact of your investment, and that you're reaching the correct organizations. And I would say almost that investing in visibility, if we call it that, is worth infinitely more than trying another 2 campaign activities that you get no feedback from. And I think that's the critical thing. Organizations, particularly when they have a finite budget, they will want to spend it and blow it all on marketing activity without considering that it's worth spending a certain percentage of that on visibility of how all of that activity is working for them.
Yeah.
It's not enough just to rely on, for example, paid search. It's not enough to rely on the projection that the paid search is offering you when you configure your campaign. You need to understand more about how it's really working for you, and all of that invisible data that you otherwise wouldn't be aware of, and therefore inevitably end up with you pulling the plug on the activity when it's not converting how you expected.
Yeah, I think oftentimes those illustrations, painted by advertising, I don't think they've ever come true for me, ever, in my whole career.
No,
so I don't know what they're
no.
based on. But so understanding, like you say, it's like you say, giving yourself visibility of that whole holistic picture actually gives you fuel to make informed decisions. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think marketers are always in a fairly extreme position of jeopardy in an organization, because it's seen as, we have this budget, we will pass it to the marketing team, they will deliver us X number of leads, and usually there's KPIs associated with that, and so on and so on. But the most important thing for a marketer in their toolbox is to have the ability to present that dashboard that I was talking about. It doesn't have to be a dashboard, but you get the idea. Be able to demonstrate the impact that the marketing activity that they are having, that it is having rather. But I think the problem is, if you are sat there as a marketer and you are doing all this activity and you just say, these are the impressions that we got, these are the number of form fills that we got, it's not enough of a picture to protect yourself. So,
Yeah.
I think if you can say we're engaging with all of these kinds of organizations and, we've been able to uncover all of this opportunity
Mm.
to go after in different ways,
Yeah.
particularly from a C-level perspective, they look at that and they're thrilled because they
Yes.
can see that you are resonating with the right kinds of companies, the right kind of size, and so on. It's just a question of how do we then unlock that
Yes.
and demonstrating value, basically.
Exactly. And it's like it's a case of right, we've got all these impressions, this small percent, have converted or whatever, but then what else are we doing with all of these? What's our strategy to make sure we're engaging with all of those? Because we call it like impressions, they're vanity metrics. It's meaningless for a business, and unless you're going to do something with it, it's meaningless. So yeah, vanity metrics, what we call that. So yeah, I think that's a great tip there. And in terms of when you've been working with your different clients, is there anything that you've seen that has surprised you and has made you kind of shift your strategies accordingly based upon what you're seeing?
Yes, absolutely. And it's happened more than once.
Really?
So, what is really fascinating, particularly in tech startup world, is that invariably they build a fantastic product. That's the hopeful starting point, right? So you have, and this works for any organization. You have your fantastic product or service that you have spent time building and perfecting. That you then think, right, this is what we perceive the value of this product or service to be. Therefore, um, we feel that we should aim at a particular sector or market or company size or whatever it is. Everybody always goes through that process when they're starting. So, and I think so. So I think tech companies and others like to focus on market segments, small to medium, mid-sized enterprise businesses. And it's particularly the case for startups. So I think part of the issue is that it's always driven by wanting to drive the highest value sales for your product or service, because everybody wants to recoup the investment that they've put into building their product or service. And in at least one or two examples, we've seen that the messaging, the comms, and the activities have all been focused on enterprise market, for example. And the sales success, conversely, has come from mid-market. So the sales team, you have enterprise salespeople, you have enterprise sales messaging. It's much more expensive, much more long time scale in terms of the sales process.
Yeah.
And we've sort of noticed that the mid market is saying this is a great product, it's a great price, and they're much quicker to sell to. And therefore, there's been this disconnect between the approach of the sales organization, what marketing is uncovering, and what is actually converting. And
Yes.
all of that obviously is driven by data and insight. And importantly, using data from sales and marketing and the engagement on both sides has led to us being able to help them retarget the messaging, and importantly, things like things that people wouldn't really necessarily jump onto in terms of this kind of visibility that you're uncovering, the kinds of events that you're going to. So going to larger mid-market events rather than niche enterprise events where you're not getting much cut through, and of course they're very expensive to attend. So just by making those adjustments within the organization, you're not only making sure that you are continuing to focus on those that you don't have to adjust your messaging much if you're already selling, obviously, because it's working, right?
Mm.
But the important thing is you're saving effort and money by not focusing on the things that aren't working. The salespeople are happier because they're getting more sales and more hot leads that aren't taking forever to close. So we've seen, real differences in an organization where you basically stop wasting time and money chasing the wrong customer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it really has been the case that we've seen that on multiple occasions.
Well, oftentimes, like you say, in early stage, like you can think that an enterprise sale is worth so much more, and so it can be tempting to go after that. But
Of
actually,
course.
like you say, the life cycle of that is so long. All the hoops you have to jump through just adds time to the process. And actually, maybe you could sell once to an enterprise organization, or you could sell many to a mid-market organization and actually get significant benefit. And then I think, particularly in tech, it's really important to sell to retain rather than
Mhm.
just sell, in
Yes.
terms of growth and value and that sort of thing. And I think that often that can be overlooked in scale up businesses where they're wanting to grow their new business rev, but not understanding the importance of retention. So I think that's really important as well. And obviously that can, if you can get that data insight, it can then again help to target those strategies. So I think that's a really important point there, is to actually look at the types of businesses that are going to be valuable, and make sure that's aligned throughout the business, marketing, sales, and beyond as well. I think that's a great point. Um, just looking forward then, what kind of what strategies do you see that are kind of emerging, or what do you think is going to be on the radar for 2025 or beyond, as the case may be? Yeah, what do you think is going to make the biggest impact?
So, I think obviously AI.
I knew you were going to say it.
No, but
Go for it. Sorry.
importantly, I think so. I could talk all day about AI,
I know.
but
I love it.
so if you talk about AI from a marketing perspective, how it'll automate data insights and marketing processes, um, and I think, if I may, I should say that marketers should be very careful of the
I
whole
agree.
AI sprinkle. Um, if you bear in mind that I work with organizations who are either have their own machine learning or large language model, or LLM, capability built into the product, or they are building it. Um, so I understand a lot about what is and what isn't true AI, and the fact that every product out there is clamoring to get the AI tick box. In fact, we've even been involved with organizations who uh, hired us specifically to combat the plethora of AI competitors that were out there,
Interesting.
because their product was better overall than the stuff that had the shiny. And that was an interesting one. But I think I think from a marketing perspective, the temptation is to say, "Oh, AI will make our lives easier. We'll be able to do more, to automate more, and so on." Now, some of that is, yes, true, but it's absolutely critical that if you are looking at a service or a tool that has AI functionality, one, is it true AI, or is it a facet thereof, like machine learning? Um, or what is it actually going to do for you day to day? Will it get in the way? So we, as an agency, we use a lot of Adobe products, as any agency would, and I find that AI gets in the way of
Well,
it's
that's fair.
constantly suggesting things and
Yeah.
constantly asking, are you sure you want to do that? Would you want to do it like this? And I'm thinking, I know what I'm doing. This is so sometimes it can be intrusive,
Yeah.
for the sake of demonstrating that capability is there. But that said, AI does have an important part to play. Just like I say, make sure that as a marketer, you fully understand exactly what it's doing and whether it does save you time and effort. Things like ChatGPT, image generators, things like that, they are very, very useful. But when it comes to data and products, you need to really get to grips and have an understanding of what it is actually doing. Because you have the whole data integrity side of things to be worried about. You have the prospect of a lesser AI hallucinating, which is something that you don't want with data. So, that's something to really be aware of. But for me, going outside of AI, I think probably the biggest trend is the proliferation of connected technologies and the consolidation of those technologies. So, for example, CRM, customer support, email, collaboration, office tools, all the things that we use as marketers day to day and other people within the organization as well. They're increasingly all being placed into one tool set. And what's really interesting is that as more of those tools come out on the market, this is another aspect of AI, I'm afraid. I'm going back to AI. So AI is enabling people to build tools and build code for software applications much, much quicker. So you can imagine that there is always a new tool on the block, as there is in any sector, for marketers to use to connect all these things. So there's CRM and the service and so on. But the good thing for marketers on that side, and the thing that I'm excited about for the future, is that means that the quite frankly ridiculous pricing that you see from some vendors will go down because of the competition. So all that proliferation and expansive, AI generation and so on, hopefully equals less marketing budget spend on that specific area. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, well, there's more, like you say, more vendors entering the market. It's kind of removed those barriers to a certain extent, or certainly reduced those barriers to entry for a lot of tech vendors. And I think the important thing with AI is you make some really great points there. Is AI can be massively advantageous for marketeers, but you have to control it. You can't let it control you.
Absolutely.
And I'll use an example. Actually, we were creating some ad text the other day, like on PPC, for example, and the suggestions that it can make, if you just take them verbatim, it's never going to work, right? It doesn't. Sometimes they just don't make sense, and so you've got to use AI to your advantage but you remain in the driving seat, because, like you say, as an experienced marketeer, you know what you want better than the AI. AI can be helpful in terms of guidance, and I actually love Midjourney. I really love Midjourney, but it has its limitations. It does, and if you were to just let it go free rein, goodness knows what it would come out with. But I think that's a really good point. It's not to just get on the AI bandwagon, to use it with a little bit of caution behind it too. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned Midjourney, because I use Midjourney a lot. And it's just like any other AI process, particularly on the generative side. You need to understand how it works and what you want to achieve with it. And of course, there's, just for anybody watching, there's tons of information out there on YouTube and so on where you can learn and understand fully how to use the tool set. But for example, from a brand perspective, and a consistency of your visuals, like you said, something like Midjourney could produce Frankenstein's monster in terms of a branding piece. But if you manage to process the images and put the prompts in that go in the right direction for you, then one of the things that you can do, as a top tip, is that you can specify as part of your prompt the seed of what it is that you like the look of, that is aligned with your brand and your colors and so on. And then that means that any images you generate will look like they've come from the same place. And so, there's videos out there that show you how to do it. I won't explain that now.
Yeah, like you say, otherwise, if you don't have that routing, then with each iteration, it could go all over the place in terms of aesthetics, like you say, and that can absolutely, hinder your brand quality.
Sometimes useful though.
Yeah, for creative ideas, if you're just trying to get some sort of inspiration, it can be fantastic for that. Just
exactly. Yeah.
Some of I mean, I just love playing with Midjourney. Right. So just before we what we'll do is a wrap up in a second. I'm just going to I'll give you a couple of seconds just to think about your top 2 or 3 takeaways. So if people listening only remember 1 or 2 things, maybe 3 from today, what would those things be? So I'll give you a couple of seconds to have a think about that. Just whilst we're doing that, I'm going to pop that poll up on the screen again for anyone who joined us late. We've talked quite a bit about the blindness of understanding who's coming to your website, not just those people who convert, but seeing everything that's coming to your website, and having visibility to determine your strategies based upon what you can't currently see. I'd love to give everybody listening a free trial of Lead Forensics so you can get that insight for yourself. You can take a look at your website visitors for 2 weeks, no cost, and let's see if there's any value there for you. So if you're interested in doing that, then just let us know in the poll that's on the screen at the minute. And if you take a trial of Lead Forensics, we'll also give you a copy of our book, which is 101 ways to drive revenue from your website. Everyone who attends gets a digital copy, but if you take a trial, we'll also send you a hard copy as well. So I mean, it's going to take you a little while to go through all of these. I think that's probably a year and more's worth of strategy right there. But it looks great on the desk too, by the way. So we'll just leave that poll up for a couple more seconds, and I think we'll take it down. Phil, are you ready? Do you have your 2 or 3 things in mind?
Yes.
Perfect. I'll hand over to you then.
Yeah, I think as with in sort of facets of everything that we've discussed today, the key takeaway that I would like to offer people is this idea of being consistent and yet agile.
Yeah.
And so consistent messaging, branded communications and activity, but all underpinned by insight. And the insight is the part that enables you to be agile. And really importantly, make sure that you have an insight strategy in place before you start spending your marketing budget. Obviously appreciating that it may be, you could have a massive budget. Fantastic, lucky you. But if you have the regular budget that most people have, then you need to make sure that that strategy is in place before you start spending that finite budget. Don't wait until you need to find out why your efforts aren't cutting through.
Interesting.
So that's my top tip, because ultimately, it's too late then. You've spent your money and you're unable to tell the board or the C-level people why it's not working.
Yeah, where it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do that. They'll go, oh no, it's not working, let's have a look at why not. And actually, if you can think about that up front, that can be really advantageous.
Exactly. It sounds an obvious takeaway, but we regularly see that, where you can share all the dashboards you like, but the ultimate takeaway is still it hasn't worked and we can't tell you why.
Yes.
So yeah, it's important to allocate part of your budget to the part which will not only tell you why, but it'll also uncover other opportunities through different methods.
Yeah, it may feel less fancy, but it's absolutely a solid foundation. I totally agree with you. Is that that's a pretty good takeaway? Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, or is that the one hero takeaway?
Yeah, I think based on our discussion on AI, I should add one on that as well. I think really, really importantly, you should make sure that if you are looking at different tools, that you do your research, you understand exactly what the AI is offering you and whether it is actually a benefit, because obviously AI has a premium and therefore your marketing budget gets squeezed even further. So do your research, look online at software resources that tell you this kind of thing, G2, a different software sites that give reviews of the product, but also importantly, look at user reviews.
Yeah.
It's important because a lot of people will say this has AI, but it's useless and I don't use it.
Yeah.
It's important to really get to grips with something, not be seduced by the shiny.
Yeah.
So.
I agree. And we have mentioned Midjourney, just to confirm. I'm not anywhere associated with Midjourney. I just happen to use it. And Phil, I'm assuming you would be similar to that. Are you
Yes,
associated with
absolutely.
Midjourney?
Absolutely.
Just
Yeah,
just
you can imagine I use every tool there is for.
Yeah. I give everything a little try.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about all of these tools that people are using, ChatGPT, Midjourney, and there are many other image generators and ever more by the week.
Yeah.
They all have their place. They all have different strengths and weaknesses, and they're all an important part of the modern marketing toolkit. And I think, importantly for everyone out there, they should just try all these different tools, not all of them, because they'll spend all their time doing that otherwise. Get to learn and understand how they work, see where it does benefit the marketing process, and use it as part of the toolkit. Like I say, it is there and is a benefit, but only if it's actually helping you.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes it's
Wholeheartedly
better
agree.
just to have the human do it. So
I totally agree with you on that one. Well, I mean, that's a brilliant way to kind of wrap up for today. I think, and I guess, all is left for me to say is a massive thank you to you, Phil. I've written a whole page of notes from our conversation. I've really enjoyed everything that you've had to say. I've enjoyed our chat, and I have no doubt that the listeners will have had a number of takeaways, and would have had some huge value from you sharing your experience and insight gleaned from the past 16 years. So yeah, thank you so much for offering your time. If anyone wants to connect with you or ask any questions or anything, I'm assuming LinkedIn is the place to go. Would that be right?
yes, yeah, they can connect me on LinkedIn, or just reach out via our website. So either of those is fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And we talked earlier about actually how you and I are kind of findable on LinkedIn relatively easily.
Yes. Yeah.
So if anyone wants to connect, feel free. Otherwise, please join us next time for our next webinar, which will be in 2 weeks' time, and we'll be sending some communications out about that. We'll also send a recording of this webinar out to everyone who attends, so you can share it with your colleagues or anything. But otherwise, thank you so much, Phil, and we'll see everybody again soon. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.